Someone asked me, and of course it's been asked before, how do you stay strong on your plan when you're cooking for others? How do you not eat your OMAD meal when you have to provide for others, when you're around food a lot? The answer is you learn to disassociate. Let me tell you a story. It goes back a little ways. I had done OMAD for just shy of about a month. But on this particular occasion, I helped my parents with a few things. We were out in the country and we had looked at some land. Well, I had about 6 hours to go for my meal. But I was so hungry because on this particular occasion I did so much activity. Plus, my parents decided to stop at this catfish parlor. I can remember just doing what I normally did, sitting there with a water in a to-go cup with just a dash of lemon in it, and I just talked. We talked about family drama and what we were going to do with Sis and my brother-in-law and a few other things. It was very hard, I remember thinking, looking at that plate and just not wanting to throw it out the window and say, screw this, this is good food. I don't even like seafood, but this is just so good. Fried catfish, delicious fixins, it was so good. Well, it was in that moment that I had the next big breakthrough with my fasting. I looked at that food and I stared at it. I stared at it and I stared at it, and my brain sort of scrambled the signal. It was as if I learned to scramble a cable signal, like the way the cable companies do, so you don't watch a channel that you're not authorized to watch. Back in the 80s, I remember my cousins and I would get together and try to look through the fuzz at the naughty channels. Being adolescents, we wanted to see the pretty girls on TV, so we would sit there when our parents were away and try to see if we could pull in the channels that Grandma had blocked on her cable. And it was such a funny time. But it was as if my brain disassociated all of the hunger, and I could look at the food like it was an eraser for a pencil. No taste at all. But I didn't know how to do that before. And it was after that, a day or two after that, I looked at myself in the mirror. I got up, brushed my teeth, went downstairs and grabbed just a bottle of water. I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, I know I can do this forever. And the peace that came over me was the best I had ever felt, because I mastered myself. But that wasn't the end. That was just the beginning, because I learned to disassociate unpleasant feelings. It didn't just stop at food. It started at food. But from there, I realized that when I was fasting for 4 to 5 months, I acquired the ability to stretch that to all sorts of experiences. For instance, if I was trying to hang up a picture and I used my tack hammer and smashed myself in the thumb, I would say all sorts of expletives because I was mad. But then the presence of mind that I acquired through managing my hunger allowed me to manage pain. So I developed the tendency to pick up my hand, look at the thumb that I had smashed with the hammer, and realize that it's really, my hand is no different than those little green zeros and ones that you see on the Matrix when the movie is trying to convey that everything is a sensory experience. It's not really you. It's just your perceived experience. So to this day I do this, and it sounds so weird if you can't relate to this. But once you go from something simple like hunger pains, you can go to something higher. You can disassociate and manage your pain, realizing they are just signals. They are just little firings in an amazingly complex code called life. So I'll pick my hand up, look at my smashed thumb, make sure that I don't need to go to the doctor or something, and move it a little. And no matter how bad it hurts, I'll say, you just disconnect it. Now, those of you who are older will recognize that reference. In the first Terminator, 1984, when Kyle Reese gets shot and Sarah Connor discovers it, she says, you're bleeding. Doesn't this hurt? And he says, you just disconnect it. I went all throughout my adult life thinking, that's crap. That's a load of crap, because of course you can't disconnect it. You're always going to feel the pain until this moment, until early 2014, when I had been fasting long enough to take my resistance to pain up a level. And I realized that with the right conditioning, with the right life experiences, that's true. You can just disconnect your pain. Through another experience I will not go into, I got an opportunity to take this further. When I was attacked, and I literally was able to absorb myself in a black hole of my mind. I could block out anything. Extreme hits to my skull and to my back, my shoulders and my legs. I was able to retreat into a dimensions, if you will, where everything was peaceful and black. I was able to do perfect meditation without practice. And the next thing I heard was, Joe, are you all right? I was totally fine, and I popped myself right back out of it when the experience was over. And I realized something happened there that was way beyond the norm. To this day, it's an ability I have. I can shut on and off unpleasant senses, and so now I have to, when some of you talk about how dealing with hunger, I have to go back in my thinking and retrace how to manage that, because it's like lost knowledge. It's like a mathematician at a high level going back to adding fractions, which is very basic. I have to go back and say, oh, it's just hunger. Oh, I remember the days when it was really difficult to manage simple pains like hunger. And that, as it grew, allowed me to sit down with the best Mexican food in the world, the best pizza in the world, and just my brain would scramble it. And look what you're looking at right here. You're looking at just a grayed out pizza. See, here it is in color. Here it is grayed out. It's all sensory experience. It's all code in a gigantically complex algorithm called life. But it's just an experience. It's not real. And that's the power. It starts with fasting. That opens up the next door. That leads on to other experiences, other realizations. The knowledge that everything is just like that code in the Matrix. Everything is built on your experiences of life from the very first moment you open your eyes. The very first time you fall and hurt your knee and mom picks you up. The very first time you get bullied on the playground. The very first time you get rejected when you ask somebody out. The very first time you make out in the back of your mom or dad's car. The very first time you sneak out of the house. The very first time you marry the wrong person. The very first time you take a job offer that doesn't pan out, you get fired, you feel like you don't fit in. The very first time you contemplate ending your own life because you don't feel like you're pretty enough, smart enough, handsome enough. You fill in the blank. All of those experiences you live as a victim because you honestly believe that everything is about this ego, this construct that you call whatever your name is. The real higher level realization behind where I'm going here is your life is a blank slate and you can write on it whatever you want to write on it. It sounds cheesy. It sounds ridiculous because Western society doesn't teach us to think this way. But the real power is in knowing that an experience is the greatest teaching tool of all. Let me take you into one more sci-fi analogy. Star Trek, the original series. The episode was called The Savage Curtain, and in it Abe Lincoln appears on the Enterprise and ends up bringing the crew down to a molten rock planet where these creatures made of molten rock are taking characters from Vulcan history and Klingon history, and they're letting them interact violently so that they can study their behavior. So at one point Kirk gets mad and goes to the Excalbian, the name of this race of extremely powerful beings. And Kirk says, what gives you the right to treat us like this, to bring us down here and make us fight? And the Excalbian replies, the same right that brought you here. You have the opportunity to be our teachers, to show us about your race and your way of life. Everything in life, all of the miserable things you have gone through, all of the things that shaped you, those are teaching tools. They are experiences that shape you. And it's the only reason they are, quote, negative is because we've been taught to interpret them that way. Just like when a child falls down, when Kayla fell down as a little kid, my mother would say, "Aw," and she'd start crying. Kayla would. When she would fall down in front of me, I'd pick her up and say, "No, you're fine." And she'd just look at me like, how should I react? And then she'd keep on playing. Because I didn't teach her to be a victim. It all starts with the ability to disassociate, to tune out what doesn't benefit you, and to, in effect, turn it around, to scramble it like that cable signal I made reference to make it powerful, to make it impactful, to give it direction, to where you can actually go somewhere that you never thought you could.